Okay, I will call this special meeting of the executive session to order. It is 10:03 a.m. on June 10th. Uh, we'll turn it over to Logan to discuss the advisory opinion request 25-02.
Thanks, Ward. So request 25-02 is the reason for today's special meeting. Senator Ryan Braunberger requested an advisory opinion for a event out of state that is happening later this month on June 27th to the 29th. We've been in communication with him, and last week he asked where things were at regarding this advisory opinion because I think he's finalizing plans to go or to not go, depending on what the advisory opinion says. So we worked on it last week, and you have the draft before you. I'll just walk through the requests and the draft here for you, the purposes of discussion. So the invitation he received was from the Center for Free Thought Equality. He was asked to participate in a panel discussion in Chicago. And at this event, he's also going to be speaking at the American Humanists Association's annual conference. They're kind of sister organizations from what we've discovered in our research. So they organize things at the same time. They have some overlap with their activities. But he was wondering if it is permissible for him to accept travel reimbursement and then the registration cost for the event to be covered by the Center for Free Thought Equality. So if you look at the draft advisory opinion, commission staff broke this down into two questions. One, is it permissible for him to attend the event in general? And then two, whether it's permissible for him while he's speaking at the event to accept registration costs and reimbursement for travel expenses. So in the factual background there, we give some background on the organizations themselves and the events that the Center for Free Thought Equality is the organization that is paying for it, even though they're associated with the American Humanist Association. Now, there's some distinction between the two. I think they really have some overlap. Again, like I said, regarding their activities. But the panel he's been invited, the main one he's been invited to speak on, it will be him, a state legislator from another state, and then one former legislative candidate that is also from another state. And then we looked at the American Humanist Association's schedule or their agenda for their event. It's not clear exactly when they're going to have him speak at that event, but that conference is, that's the one that covers multiple days. The other one is just an hour or two within that bigger conference. But as a whole, the conference has main stage talks, breakout sessions. It's like any other standard convention when you look at the agenda with speakers and panel discussions, and then there's one social event and an award ceremony. So the organizations are pretty transparent about the work that they do. The Center for Free Thought Equality says it's an advocacy and political organization. They call it the arm of the bigger American Humanist Association. And then we put in there what kind of issues they advocate for. The Center for Free Thought Equality also says that it's dedicated to lobbying and political advocacy. That's important for the analysis piece of this advisory opinion because we're not sure what they mean by lobbying. Because if you look at their website, a lot of what they focus on is lobbying in Washington on Capitol Hill, but then it also mentions local, state, or other lobbying where they alert supporters to contact lawmakers. So it's not really clear if they hire lobbyists at the state level to do things. But I'll get to that when we go into the analysis. And then the American Humanist Association, we just pulled what they do from their website. Again, I think they were pretty transparent about the work that they do and that they're politically active organizations. Then when we get into the legal background, Again, this is a gifting question, so we start with the baseline prohibition in the Constitution that a public official can't accept a gift from a lobbyist, that the commission can make exceptions for in-state events. So then we list those exceptions, which if this was an in-state event, the analysis would be easier because there's that exception when you're presenting that you can accept those costs as long as it's in North Dakota. So for out-of-state events, then we had to turn to a previous advisory opinion, 23-02. That was, I believe, the Soybean Growers Association requested one regarding an out-of-state event. So we put in there that when you're looking at these out-of-state events, that's a different analysis. Because the commission can only make exceptions for in-state events, the question then becomes whether lobbying is occurring at all at these out-of-state events. And the advisory opinion from 2 years ago listed types of events where it's easier to tell. I think there's 3 different events. There's one where it's just an objective, run-of-the-mill educational event. Then there's 2, a more subjective event that's presented from a particular view or lens. And then that advisory opinion gave 5 factors to run through for those types of events for a public official to determine whether lobbying is occurring. And then there's a 3rd type of event for out of state where it's very clear that lobbying is occurring, where they're given suggested legislation. So that's what that advisory opinion said. So that's what we use in the analysis here. The advisory opinion said there's 2 fundamental questions public official needs to ask themselves. Is the travel expense a gift? And 2, is it given in conjunction with an effort to lobby? So the advisory opinion, this draft runs through those 2 questions. The first question, yes, travel expenses are always going to be gifts. They're unquestionably gifts, is the term 2302 used. So again, here, it's a gift, so you need to focus on whether lobbying is occurring. And now that's the less clear answer because of the way that this organization is set up and the way that the agenda is set up for this event. So again, going back to 2302, this event seems more subjective. It's going to be presented through a particular lens, but there's nothing that was presented to us that says that they will give out suggested legislation or suggests legislation for legislators to take back to their state. So we thought it fell in that mid-level ground where it's a more subjective event, where we look to those 5 factors that were in the previous advisory opinion. So that's what we did here. I'll run through those 5 factors. 1 is the overarching objectives of the event sponsors. 2, the topics of presentations, panel discussions, or social occasions. 3, the scope and type of invitees to the event. 4, materials provided to a public official before, during, and after the out-of-state event. 5, communications received by a public official before, during, and after the out-of-state event from the event sponsor or other invitees. So when you look at the event that Senator Braunberger is looking to go to, we looked at the schedule, the agenda, the information he provided us, and there's really 2 factors that appear to focus more on that education than lobbying piece. And that's the presentation topics and the communications he received. Most of the he gave us one piece of communication where he's asked to be an educator essentially at the event and present on a panel. And then if you look at the overall agenda, again, it's focused on, from what we can tell, education through that subjective lens, but there's nothing that suggests overt lobbying occurring at this event. Now, that doesn't mean that things will change, and the agenda wasn't fully fleshed out when we looked at it. So it's really unclear at this point whether in total it'll take on a lobbying approach more than an educational approach. And there's also that social event that it's not described what's going to occur at that social event. Some other events that the commission has looked at, the host will put a social event on there for the distinct purpose of lobbying. It's unclear whether that's the case here. So we can't really analyze it in full. And then we also looked at the remaining factors, the overarching objectives. It's unclear whether they're doing it to politically advocate for the attendees. We're not even sure who the attendees are. The materials that are provided, there hasn't been a lot sent our way or that's available online before the event. And then we don't know what communications are going to be happening at the event or after the event. So it's a little unclear at best regarding those three factors. So the draft opinion notes that and then focuses on their dedication to, quote, lobbying and political advocacy that demonstrates an intent to more widely influence, which would be lobbying potentially. So that's why the conclusion is take caution. If it's a little unclear whether lobbying is going to occur, there's nothing that suggests overt lobbying, but if the senator goes and discovers lobbying is occurring, then the advisory opinion advises that you may leave the event or stay and pay fair market value for attendance. And that's in accordance with the previous advisory opinion 23-02, that it was the same suggestion there for these types of events when they occur. But then there's also the alternative. He's going not necessarily as an attendee, but as a presenter. So if he goes for the limited purpose of being a presenter, what do you do with that when you're serving really in that educator role rather than an attendee who's there to intake all the information, whether that's lobbying, educational, or otherwise? If you're not there for that purpose, does that present a separate issue? And the advisory opinion concludes that yes, if you're there to present and to work, you're not really there for the purposes of being lobbying, you're there for the purposes of being an educator. So it should be permissible in that instance for you to accept reimbursement for your traveling to attend and work at the conference. And that's the conclusion there on page 9. Any questions?
Yeah, this is Murray. I had trouble getting past the gift issue. And here's my rationale. This organization has contacted the senator because of his expertise and said, essentially, we want to contract with you to come to speak at our organization because of your expertise, and as if you are a consultant. And because of that, we're not going to pay you any stipend, but we will cover all of your travel related expenses. And so it's a business, it's in effect a business transaction. And so that if you look at the definition of gift, it says gift means any item, service, or thing of value not given in exchange for fair market consideration. And so my issue is his presentation on that panel fair market consideration for paying his travel related expenses? And I am suggesting that it is fair market consideration. Therefore, you don't even get past the gift issue on the matter. You see where I'm coming from? So if it's not a gift to go and speak, then none of the other issues are relevant. However, if he goes there to speak as a business transaction, and then he stays over and participates in lobbying activities, that's an entirely different matter. But because when I go back to the invitation, it says, I would like you to be on a panel of elected officials and candidates who were in very close elections in 2024 to talk about your experiences as a candidate and what people can do to support candidates in addition to voting. They're not talking about lobbying, they're talking about his experiences as a candidate. And I'm really troubled by the jump right into presuming that this is a gift. That's my concern.
Anyone else have thoughts?
This is Ron. I see what Mary's saying. I felt that if you, I don't think it's a gift. It's kind of consideration for his participation at the conference. It's more like he is a presenter at the conference, like a speaker would be, and his consideration there would be the travel, and the meals and that type of thing. And it's so I don't know, Murray, if that's what you're concerned about, or if that's your point, but I don't see it as a gift.
And I'm focusing on the reason that he was invited to attend. He was invited to attend as a speaker on a very specific issue about experiences as a candidate, and I wouldn't even be offended if he would have been paid a stipend for it, because if it would almost like a consultant coming and giving an expert opinion or an event on that event. And so, like I say, I'm just troubled that I am concerned that it is not a gift if it focuses, if that invitation focused on that very specific issue. So that's my comment. Now, when I go to the end, the end of the opinion doesn't say you can't go. The end of the opinion says be careful. And I would agree with that. Even if he goes just to be a speaker, if he deviates from that speaker role, then he has to be careful. So
Also, Logan, did I see somewhere in this this request that he was thinking about submitting some request for funds from the state of North Dakota? Did I see that, or am I wrong?
No, he's not requesting.
I completely understand that. If he went to a breakout, so he finishes his speaking gig, and then he walks around the conference and attends a breakout session. And in the breakout session, they hand him proposed legislation to take back to introduce in the legislature in the next session. That's lobbying in my mind. But that's separate from the speaking invitation. I'm done. I won't say anymore. You've heard what I
Well,
said.
Well, and that's what that's my understanding of our advice is we're cautioning him. Fine, we don't have a problem with you going and the travel being paid. You're invited to be a speaker, to be part of this panel group, and I think Logan has explained it well relative to just be careful because you could cross a line because this one organization is saying this is part of their work and what they do. And so, yeah, and I'm assuming as an elected official, he will know. So if somebody approaches him or if they say, oh, here, wait, we've got this national piece of legislation pending or whatever, that he should avoid that or walk away. Yeah. And then my other point or comment to Murray, to your point, I kind of struggled with these definitions of gift. And how they're both not ours so much as the North Dakota's administrative code, because it's like I don't view being invited someplace and they're going to pay my travel to come as a presenter speaker. I don't view that as a gift. And so, and I think maybe that's what you're trying to get to, Murray. It's really more they're inviting you because of who you are and your experiences or expertise. And so maybe it is more of a contractual thing versus, so for me, I struggle with the point of travel being considered a gift.
Well,
But as I kept reading, I'm like, okay, fine. We have to work with the way it's written and within that context.
To reply to you, Cynthia, you are, because you're on the Ethics Commission, a public official. And if you are invited to speak at an organization and talk about your experiences as a member of the Ethics Commission, and they offer to pay your travel-related expenses, which are, and so you submit a statement to them, here are my exact travel-related expenses, not a cent more, not a cent less. You're being reimbursed 100%. In my mind, that's not a gift at all. And so you don't even get to the next issue. And that's what troubles me about that. And it goes back to that earlier opinion, that 2023 opinion that basically says to answer the first question, travel expenses are unquestionably gifts. And I think that's wrong. And so I agree with the ultimate conclusion of the opinion. I disagree with how we got there.
Okay. Much better said. Yes. And
Cynthia,
I get that and I agree.
Other thoughts? Any other thoughts?
I'll just say I dropped off there for a bit. The Polycom had internet issues, so I'm not sure if Ron heard my answer to his question. But there's nothing I saw that he was requesting state funds to attend.
Yeah, you answered that. But what's your take on our discussion here, Logan?
I tend to agree with the commission. I think it's written this way because the 2302 advisory opinion said travel expenses are unquestionably gifts. So that's why we jumped to the gift analysis. I think if we rewrite it it would probably have been a lot easier to write the way Murray is suggesting, that if it's offered in for fair market consideration, it's not a gift. I think that's a shorter advisory opinion. But I think there's another issue too that comes up when we get into this context, and it's the definition of lobbying. So what is lobbying? Is lobbying also occurring in these types of instances where you're being paid to render a service? Whether that's an agreement between a lobbying organization or what have you, is that also an instance where this gifting analysis kicks in? I don't know. And maybe that's something the commission would like to address when we relook at the gift rules, is that definition of lobbying, because that's borrowed from the definition for legislative lobbying in the Century Code. If that makes sense.
Well, I don't want to delay giving an opinion to the senator. And basically, the opinion concludes, you can go, but be careful, right?
Yeah, and I think that's reasonable.
At the same time, I recommend that the commission revisit the issue of the gift, the opinion, the previous opinion in which this is relied on, and Ron, perhaps, or Ward, I suggest that we add this to the agenda of the next meeting.
Okay. Logan, can you see that we do that?
Yes, and I can rework it.
So,
Okay. What would you like to do, Commission?
I move that, go ahead, Cindy.
I'll make a motion to approve the draft language and issue advisory opinion 25-02 to the requester and for publication on the commission's website.
There's
I'll
support.
second.
Okay, we have a motion with support. Any other discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Ward Kozer,
Aye.
Cynthia Lindquist,
Aye.
Ron Goodman,
Aye.
Murray Stagsine,
aye.
Motion carries. Okay, the next item on the agenda is complaint number 25-070. This item must be discussed in executive session. The legal authority for closing this portion of the meeting is North Dakota Century Code 54-66-12 sub 1, North Dakota Century Code 54-66-12-3, and North Dakota Century Code 44-04-19.2 section 1. The topic or purpose of this executive session is discussion on complaint number 25-070. Information regarding the content and parties of the complaint to the Ethics Commission is confidential. As the complaint must be discussed in executive session, no motion is needed to enter executive session. The executive session will be recorded, and all members of the governing body are reminded to limit their discussion during the executive session to the announced topic. Any collective decision, collective commitment, or other final action by the governing body must occur after it reconvenes in an open meeting. The prohibition on taking final action during executive session does not apply to providing guidance or instructions to our attorney. We will now ask the members of the public who are attending the meeting to leave the meeting. We anticipate adjourning the executive session, reconvening the open portion of the meeting in approximately, what do you think, Logan?
5 minutes. So
5 minutes. Okay. The minutes will show that the executive session began at 10:33 p.m. or a.m., and was attended by General Counsel Logan Carpenter, Commissioners Lindquist, Goodman, Sagsveen, and Kozer. So at this time, I guess we close out of this meeting and go to the executive session, okay? Sorry about that. I went to the wrong meeting. Okay, the minutes will show that the executive session was adjourned at 10:37 a.m. The public has been invited to return to the meeting conference call, and we are now back in open session.
All right. Based on our conversation in our executive session, I move that we dismiss complaint number 25-070 and direct our executive director, Rebecca Benstock, to dismiss that complaint for lack of subject matter jurisdiction.
Is there support?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion with support. Any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Ward Kozer,
Aye.
Cynthia Lindquist,
Aye.
Ron Goodman,
Aye.
Marie Sagsby,
Aye.
Motion carries. That being all the business we had on the agenda, I will adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye, folks.